Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Twice Upon a Time from 1983. And this was a winner of the Patreon movie review vote. If you would like for me to review a movie of your choice, then click on the link below and pledge, and maybe I'll be reviewing your movie next month. And this winner was selected by Dan Leon. Twice Upon a Time is a film I've actually been wanting to review for since I think I've had a YouTube channel, really, because it's such a unique animated film. In fact, I was shown it in an animation class to show a film that shows how unique animation can be, not just your standard Disney stuff, all the possibilities of animation. And I think it is a great example of that, actually, because of its weird animation aesthetic of cut out stop motion things, much like what we would later see in South Park, probably only in the early South Parks at this point. They obviously aren't cutting construction paper out. In this they did, and they use live action footage, they use photography, they use found footage with one of the characters who's a gorilla with a TV in his head. It's a really strange, wild animated film, and it's amazing that it happened at all. This was executive produced and made by George Lucas with LucasFilm. Came out the same year as Return of the Jedi. Actually came out 3 days after I was born. It's a very strange, weird, kind of funky animated movie, and the whole premise of it is basically that they say the world of Din, which is basically Earth. Why they call it Din, I don't know, but they do. That these evil ravens are going to drop kind of nightmare bombs on the world and give people just constant nightmares and upset everyone, because we would just have I think it's just have nightmares, but the way they make it out makes you feel like just people are always gonna have nightmares or something. And then the character of Ralph, the all-purpose animal who can change into multiple different animals, and Mum or Mumford, who's a mime, sort of looks like Chaplin, doesn't do any Chaplin routines that I could see, but maybe there is a reference I missed. And they have to go and stop these guys from doing it, and they stop the time clock, so the whole world of Din is frozen. They can show off that photography stuff, and then they have to get the time to start again and get away all the nightmares from infecting the world, from just being bummed out because they had a lot of nightmares all the time. That's basically it. There's other complications. There's a parody of a superhero. There's a girl who wants to be an actress. They're I don't really understand, those characters I've never really liked, and they don't really work in the movie, to be honest. It's really pushing this thing. I never really like them, but I do like certain aspects of this film a lot. And I think what really stands out about this film is its uniqueness. Now that might sound like I'm sort of just coasting on well, this film is fine because it's different, but this film is very different, actually. And I've often talked about how in the 80s and before we had specific tons of animation studios making features, you'd get an animated feature that would be made by this weird collection of people, and that is a studio, and you never get that collection of people back together again. You get these different kind of character designs and music and actors and things, but since they never all make a follow-up together, you just get this one unique kind of feature, which sounds crazy now, by the way. We just don't have that anymore. And Twice Upon a Time is definitely that. It has a crazy amount of cool people involved in it, from that George Lucas connection. You also have David Fincher worked on this. This is one of his early films. I believe he worked on both the 83 Lucasfilm releases of Return of the Jedi and this. I was here that he knew George Lucas through family friends. He also knew the director. His sister was in one of the director's things he made for Sesame Street, so he had a lot of connections to this. He did some photography. I think he helped shoot some of this, as well as Henry Selick was an animator on this as well. So this kind of insane. I couldn't pick out any other names, but if you do pick out their names, the cool thing about the credits is they have pictures of everyone who worked on it, which is I think the only, in the background, kind of a collage type thing. Another thing I've never seen an animated film do before, or a film in general, and I thought it was actually kind of neat. I could not pick out Henry Selick or David Fincher, but they're there presumably, and I'm actually just assuming those are the people who worked on it, because I couldn't pick out the two famous people, so maybe I'm fucking wrong as shit, but I don't know. They also have Lorenzo Music, and Arthur Freed is the narrator, but Lorenzo Music plays Ralph, who's the all-purpose animal, who I like, who both was Bill Murray in Ghostbusters, in the cartoon at least, and Garfield, obviously. But he does a really good performance. In fact, he's one of my favorite things about this film. A lot of the things about this film is its complete unavailability. It's like impossible to find this movie. It was actually really hard for me to find a copy of this to review it, even though I'd seen it before. It used to be sort of available on most libraries, would have a VHS of it, just because I don't really know why, but they did. I'm not sure, like, with Disney buying Lucasfilm, like, why this isn't on Disney Plus, or like what the right, I'm sure this doesn't. The thing with this film and its uniqueness is it's sort of a double-edged sword, so, or if that's the right metaphor analogy, where it is really different and unique and you've never seen anything like it, but it is amazingly unmarketable. Like, this is one animated film that's like, you know, a superhero. It has, like, you know, all this like crazy stuff going on. You definitely like try to make an ad for it, but the animation is really weird. Like, most of the people are improvising, they're not using real dialogue, so it's like, it feels like kind of haphazard while also being very purposely curated. It's probably because the director was kind of a weirder guy, John Cordy, who Lucas and Coppola actually looked up to when they were making films in San Francisco. They thought he was really cool. This is kind of a thing Lucas did at the time. You look at what he did with Akira Kurosawa, obviously, but also Irving Kershner with Empire Strikes Back. I believe he looked up to him as well, if I'm correct on that. And he, you know, Lucasfilm was kind of a weirder studio. They do things with, they made a Paul Schrader film, they, you know, they made Howard the Duck, obviously, but like, this is like par for the course for Lucas and Lucasfilm. Like, I know they make like huge films, but like the ones that aren't Indiana Jones and Star Wars were this weirder stuff. And although I think there's probably like some similarities to this and like his later animated film Strange Magic, which is not animated that differently and is not honestly interesting enough, as interesting as this, really. I think this is a much better, more interesting film. I like that Lucas was able to embrace a different filmmaker like this, John Cordy. This is also directed by Charles Swenson, who's an animator and interesting in his own right, but I think John Cordy is just somebody who's very interesting animator. He made a documentary, later won an Oscar for his documentary, but you can tell he had like kind of a overall crazy vision for this, and this is an insane crazy vision. That's like kind of what works about it. The improvisation thing, apparently mostly Lucas liked working with improvisational actors on his weirder I've always heard there's a connection to that in THX. I don't really know if that's true here, like if Lucas got to. I feel like he sort of let directors alone, but I don't know the behind the scenes details. That does give it sort of a weird kind of crazy vibe. This film just feels like it shouldn't exist in a lot of ways, and you're like not sure where it's going sometimes, but then it like wraps up with like nice 80s music and you're like, oh, I guess it wasn't so crazy, and you're like, nah, it was kind of insane. With all these different animation techniques. I think there's probably better films that use different animation and use that as a point, like the stop motion Alice, which I quite like, which takes a story we've heard before and puts it in a new direction. This tries to sort of parody fairy tales and stuff, but that doesn't really work. So it's sort of a strange, weird animated film, basically. But that, you know, the Lad Company, which is the studio that put it out, Lucasfilm's a studio, but they'd always find a distributor. They didn't really distribute things, much like all the Star Wars films were distributed by 20th Century Fox. So they found the Lad Company, and the Lad Company had a choice. They had this and the right stuff. They decided to give the right stuff a wide release and give this a limited release, although they were originally going to give it a wide release or a worldwide release or whatever. I've heard some, when I've looked this up, like some people criticizing that. I've seen both these films. I think it was the right call, frankly. The Right Stuff is a really great movie, but it's also like way more accessible and mainstream. The Right Stuff bombed, which confuses me to this day. I don't understand how that happened, but I don't see Twice Upon a Time becoming like $100 million blockbuster. It is a little surprising it didn't do better and isn't more available, because it is the other film Lucasfilm made in 1983, and Return of the Jedi is a pretty massive film. You'd think that you'd put a lot more money behind it, but the Lad Company, like, it totally fell apart after this and was completely bankrupt pretty soon after this whole thing. So neither film sort of made money, and then the Lad Company fell apart. I think both films should have done pretty well because they're both like a sight to see, frankly, and are both great movies. If you've never seen The Right Stuff, I recommend it. Different version of this film that's sort of eked out, which made this film a little more notorious and has been reconstructed fairly recently. If you can find that, this film's hard to find, and having a different version makes it even worse. But one of the characters, Serenus guy, basically was cursing more. There's takes where he was cursing, and somehow that got sent to HBO, and HBO got some complaints, but mainly the director, John Cordy, didn't actually want that out and sent them another version. So first they pulled it, and then they did play the regular version instead of the curse-slated version, and then HBO actually got criticized because people believe they're censoring their films. So then they said, fuck this, we're not playing it anymore. I hate this movie. Get this away. Which is kind of a funny thing with it. It did play on Showtime and other kind of pay TV things. I never saw it on TV as a kid. I only saw it as a grown-up person. Maybe I saw it somewhere as a very little kid and don't remember it, which is like, I guess, possible. But yeah, it did play on HBO, and that version kind of came out. But I'd say, you know, the thing about this film, you're seeing it for the animation, and that might sound like a weak excuse. That might sound like I'm just, you know, to say you see this film for its cinematography, but the animation in this is so unique and so different, and everything about this film is unique unto itself. It is definitely worth a watch for that. It's probably, if you're going to make a case for films like this, it's definitely a good example of that. I don't think the story is really that great. I've never really liked this film for a story. I've always wanted to watch this because of the animation. The several times I've seen it, actually, I always think of, oh, I remember the animation. That's what I remember about this movie. I remember the time stopping, sort of, and I'm still confused what the plot's about. It's weird and strange, and it's sort of not clear. It's cool seeing Lorenzo music in something. It's, you know, nice seeing this kind of different animation. I always enjoy going into this world, but this is not like a film you see for the storytelling. But that's fine. I think there are certain films you just marvel at the filmmaking in itself. And if there's ever a film to do that, I think Twice Upon a Time might be one of the best examples of that, because there really isn't a feature film like this. I can't think of one. Maybe there is somewhere, but this just feels such a unique, strange film that came out from the biggest director, the guy who directed the biggest film of the year and the biggest franchise, or I guess didn't really direct, but whatever. It's just a surprising film, and it kind of reminds you the kind of films and filmmaking George Lucas is into, but also shows you the kind of different things animation can do and will do if you let it. And Twice Upon a Time kind of opens you up to the possibilities. You might not be enticed by the story those possibilities are telling, but it's nice to at least watch those possibilities and imagine what more could happen if you were going to get into them. So if you have seen Twice Upon a Time and you'd like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to. And this was a winner of the Patreon movie review vote. If you would like for me to review a movie of your choice, then click on the link below and pledge, and maybe I'll be reviewing your movie next month. Thank you very much for watching.